Have you ever visited a market so structured, so rule-bound, that you'd forget all the rules the moment you walked in? Welcome to the bustling, orderly, and deeply polite world of the Aztec Marketplace. But don't worry, this isn't a lesson in economics. It's bedtime. Before you nod off, just know, if you showed up to buy tomatoes without bowing correctly to the tomato vendor, well, that was a mild scandal. And if you haggled too loudly, you'd be judged by a merchant priest whose only job was to keep things civil. Tonight, let's slow things down. Let the gentle rhythms of a society obsessed with marketplace manners lull you to sleep. Forget modern chaos. The Aztecs had etiquette so intricate, it was meant to be forgotten. So fluff your pillow, close your eyes, and drift through the forgotten courtesies of a market long vanished into time. Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into the thick, pulsing heartbeat of the Aztec world, not into war or temples, but into something far more terrifying: polite society. That's right, you're stepping into the legendary marketplace of Tlatelolco, the commercial capital of the Aztec Empire. A sea of traders, priests, farmers, and fruit sellers, all governed by an invisible web of customs so specific, so precise, that you'll probably forget half of them before you even make it past the sweet potato stand. You stand at the edge, sandals dusty, and eyes blinking at the sheer scale. It's like walking into a shopping mall designed by a god with a passion for chaos and order simultaneously. Picture this: stalls in strict grids, incense curling up from little clay pots, vendors shouting in a language that feels musical, and thousands, yes, thousands, of people who all seem to know exactly where they're going and how to behave. Except you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Maybe you're at the edge of sleep, or just trying to keep your eyes open. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a step forward and immediately get side-eyed by a vendor squatting near a heap of dried cactus paddles. Why? Because you're standing in the wrong place. There's a traffic pattern here, and your arrival has already clogged it up like a tamale stuck in a narrow throat. The Aztecs didn't mess around with crowd control. The entire market is zoned into sections for each type of good. Produce here, textiles there, live animals yonder, each with its own unique etiquette. Wander out of the corn zone while discussing chili prices, and you've just committed what is, essentially, a micro-crime. As you trudge deeper in, trying to look casual and not like a confused time traveler, the sounds blend into a humming lullaby. Drums thump gently from a distant ceremonial platform, flutes trill lazily near the flower sellers, and vendors murmur greetings so polite you're not even sure if they're talking to you or the maze. Honestly, they might be talking to the maze. You pass a man delicately balancing a basket of turquoise beads on his head. You try to dodge him, but forget the Aztec custom of passing left side only. Another strike. You murmur an apology, but your accent warps the Nahuatl word tlazacamity, thank you, into something that sounds like wet goat, and the man's eyebrow twitches. Here's a mainstream fact to ground you. Tlatelolco, the great market of the Aztecs, was described by Hernán Cortés's men as having over 60,000 people trading there on busy days. It was so well organized, so sprawling, that even battle-hardened Spaniards were more overwhelmed by the market than by the human sacrifices. That says a lot. Now here's your first quirky tidbit. There was an entire stall dedicated to selling human hair, presumably for wigs, cloth making, or slightly darker purposes no one wants to ask about. You walk past it now, unsure whether you should be impressed or mildly horrified. Back to you. You finally spot a stall that looks promising. Dried cacao beans, stacked neatly in gourd bowls. Perfect. You lean in, But the moment your shadow hits the merchandise, the vendor lets out a small, polite cough. You've committed another faux pas. You're casting shade, literal and social, on someone's cocoa beans. In Aztec market culture, even your shadow had etiquette. You awkwardly stepped back, nearly bumping into a woman with a basket of live ducklings. She tuts quietly. Apparently, you're not supposed to backpedal in the middle of the produce quadrant. You try a soft smile, but this only reveals your teeth, another no-no. In polite Aztec interaction, smiles were restrained, closed-mouth affairs. Too toothy? That's verging on predatory. Now, historians still argue whether the market had posted rule signs or whether every citizen just internalized these behaviors from birth. There are no concrete murals or codices that list the full dos and don'ts of marketplace conduct, but based on descriptions and colonial accounts, the social rules were deeply embedded and followed so naturally that even slight deviations would mark you as hopelessly out of sync. You finally plant your feet in what seems like a neutral, stall-free zone. Deep breath. You made it 30 steps. Only about 10,000 more to go. But just as you think you've got a moment to observe, a group of young merchants glides past, heads tilted down respectfully. You realize they're avoiding your gaze. Oops. You've been making direct eye contact this whole time, scanning faces like a bouncer at a nightclub. In Aztec society, direct eye contact, especially in the marketplace, could be read as aggressive or worse, romantic. You were basically flirting with the tomato vendor. Congratulations, there's an older man seated near a pyramid-shaped arrangement of clay bowls. He gestures vaguely in your direction and mumbles something that sounds approving, or was it dismissive? Hard to tell. He could be blessing you or cursing your lineage. Either way, you nod respectfully and shuffle off. By now, you're sweating. Not from heat, but from pure social anxiety. This place isn't just a market. It's a theater, and you're an understudy who never got the script. Even the way people stand here has layers. Feet slightly apart if you're bargaining. Together if you're listening. 1 foot forward if you're preparing to leave. Honestly, it's like trying to interpret semaphore using just your shins. Still, you take comfort in the rhythm of the place. The soft scuffle of sandals. The gentle drone of conversation. The wafting scents of copal incense and hot maize cakes. You might be terrible at following the rules, but at least you're immersed in a culture so rich, even its etiquette feels sacred. Just don't sneeze. That'll be an entirely separate etiquette violation we'll get to later. You've barely survived your entrance into the marketplace, and already you're sweating from embarrassment, awkwardness, and the spicy air. Still, you tell yourself, how hard can a greeting be? Just smile, nod, maybe offer a pleasant hello. Right? Wrong. You square your shoulders and approach a vendor selling what appears to be dried herbs wrapped in corn husks. You muster up the friendliest "good day" you can manage, something chipper, polite, sincere. In modern terms, you'd be acing this. But in Tlatelolco, your words land with a quiet thud. The vendor blinks, expression unreadable. Then, politely but firmly, they turn their back to you. Okay, let's rewind. In the Aztec Marketplace, greetings were sacred rituals, not casual hellos. You didn't just speak, you performed. The custom was to bow slightly at the waist, keep your eyes modestly downturned, and address the person with a title based on their age, gender, profession, and status. It's not hi or hey. It's more like, noble elder merchant of flower bundles, may the gods scent your soul. But, in fluent Nahuatl, without the bow, the title, and the subtle non-threatening eye stance, your greeting registers somewhere between clumsy toddler and arrogant time bandit. You try again. This time you give a half bow, but it's too fast. More of a panicked nod. You pair it with a mumbled tlazacamity. That's thank you, not hello, but it's the only phrase you sort of remember. The vendor raises one eyebrow in a way that says, "We both know that's not the greeting for this situation. You've greeted someone with a thank you." Classic. Here's a mainstream historical fact to ground you in your humiliation. The Aztecs had a rich vocabulary for respect, including over a dozen different terms of address depending on a person's rank. It's said that even within families, children had to greet their elders with formal reverence. Casual speech was reserved only for close equals, and even then, often layered with ritualistic politeness. Now for your quirky tidbit. Some merchants were so esteemed that approaching them required a middleman, a polite conversational emissary who'd handle greetings and negotiations on your behalf. You couldn't just barge in with "How much for the guavas?" That would be like striding into Buckingham Palace to ask the Queen for a banana. So here you are, standing awkwardly, trying not to breathe too loudly, facing a vendor who is trying very hard not to make this worse for you. You look down. No eye contact, right? You clutch your hands in front of you. That's respectful, yes? Maybe. Historians still argue whether marketplace etiquette was enforced by formal schooling or simply absorbed through repetition and observation. The Kalmakak schools certainly taught noble children how to behave, including speech forms and ceremonial manners. But what about the average tomato shopper? Was there a secret handbook? Or did people just slowly learn not to say "What's up?" to a priest selling chili oil? You decide to move on. Maybe a younger vendor will be less strict. You wander toward a stall run by a pair of teenage girls selling flower garlands and carved obsidian beads. They glance at you, amused but not unkind. This time, you try the bow again. Slower, more respectful. You avoid eye contact. You murmur, "Quema," a neutral word, something like "indeed." One of the girls stifles a laugh, but she responds with a proper greeting. You've done it. You've achieved level 1, barely acceptable. Encouraged, you straighten slightly and make eye contact with a passing child. He immediately looks away and runs into a stack of gourds. Oops. Eye contact again. You really are a menace to polite society. A whisper of incense floats by. You glance to your right and see a man sitting cross-legged, face painted with soft gray powder. He's a marketplace priest, and his job is to bless trades, settle disputes, and enforce etiquette. You realize he's been watching you for a while, not accusingly, just patiently, as if waiting for you to explode from sheer social discomfort. You offer a nod, slow, careful, not too deep. The priest lifts his chin half an inch. Acknowledged, tiny victories. Around you, greetings continue like an elegant choreography. A noblewoman approaching a spice merchant bows once, gently touches her heart, and offers a lyrical string of words that likely references the sun, the seller's ancestors, and the quality of the pepper. The seller returns the gesture with a humble lowering of his chin and an even more elaborate string of sounds that make you wish for subtitles. Honestly, if greetings here were text messages, they'd be 7 paragraphs long and footnoted. A young man in a turquoise tunic brushes past you, murmuring a breathy apology without making eye contact. His gait is smooth, his shoulders slightly slouched, humble posture. You watch, trying to imitate it as you walk. 1 foot forward, soft steps, respectful distance from the older woman ahead of you. You don't greet her because you're not buying anything. Good. You remembered that rule. You pass a stall selling sandals. The vendor nods at you, a full, open gesture. A friendly merchant. This is your moment. You take a slow step forward, offer a modest bow, keep your eyes on the ground, and say, "Quali tonali." It means good day. Nailed it. The vendor grins. A real grin. The kind that tells you maybe you're not a complete disaster. You even manage to ask, softly, carefully, how much the sandals cost. The vendor responds in a flurry of nahuatl that is, frankly, too fast for your brain to process. You nod, pretending to understand. He gestures to the ground. You realize he's inviting you to sit. Another social cue. You squat, cross-legged. Not bad. Your knees crack a little, but you're not a child anymore. You are now fully engaged in polite Aztec Marketplace interaction. You've spoken, bowed, avoided eye contact, sat on command, and survived without accidentally proposing marriage to a squash. Honestly, you deserve a ceremonial feather. You're finally seated, ankles tingling, next to a vendor who's still smiling at you with patient amusement. Just as you're about to ask another carefully crafted question, maybe about the color of the sandals, something distracts you. Your hand rises instinctively, pointing that it's not aggressive, just a casual gesture. The way you might indicate a pair of shoes you like at the mall. Harmless. Except here, in Tlatelolco, you've just committed one of the most subtle, but widely frowned upon, offenses in the etiquette handbook. You pointed, not even dramatically, just a quiet, index finger flick in the direction of a second pair of sandals, dyed a dusty crimson with cochineal. But in the marketplace of the Aztecs, pointing with a finger was seen as childlike, disrespectful, or even outright confrontational. The vendor's smile thins, just a little, that he doesn't scold you. That would be impolite, but he doesn't look at the sandals either. He just waits. The correct way to indicate something you want? A gentle tilt of the head, a soft sweep of the whole hand, palm up, wrist low. Pointing was reserved for gods and rulers, people who could literally dictate with a gesture. You are decidedly not a god, and your index finger is not helping your reputation here. You quickly lower your hand, mutter something vaguely apologetic, and attempt the proper hand sweep. It's a bit too flamboyant, more magician than merchant, but the vendor gives you a merciful nod. Crisis averted. Here's a mainstream historical fact for context. Aztec body language was highly codified. It served as a nonverbal language, especially in noisy marketplaces where shouting was discouraged. Gestures conveyed rank, intent, emotional state, and humility. One scholar noted that Aztec nobility were trained from youth to move with quiet, deliberate grace, minimizing sharp gestures or sudden movements. Your modern arm-flailing tendencies? Not ideal here. Now for your quirky tidbit. In some Aztec regions, pointing at a rainbow was taboo, believed to bring illness or spiritual imbalance. So really, your gesture at those sandals could have been misinterpreted as anything from arrogance to curse casting. You watch more seasoned shoppers approach the stalls nearby. A man gestures toward a basket of dried chilies using a chin tilt. No words, no hands. The vendor nods, understands, and lifts the basket for closer inspection. Efficient, quiet, mutually respectful. You try it, too. Eyebrows up, chin lifted, a subtle glance. It kind of works. Or at least no one slaps your hand this time. Historians still argue whether gestural etiquette varied between classes, or if merchants had different standards depending on a buyer's social status. Some accounts suggest noble-born Aztecs were expected to be even more restrained, while commoners may have had a bit more flexibility, though still within limits. You, an outsider, seem to occupy a curious middle ground, tolerated, but visibly out of sync. You rise from your squat position, slowly, with both hands on your knees like a creaky old man, and thank the vendor. Again, not quite the right phrase, but he smiles anyway. Either he's warm to your effort, or he's just enjoying the free entertainment. Next, you wander toward a cluster of fruit sellers. Their stalls overflow with prickly pears, guavas, zapotes, and other unpronounceable but delicious treasures. One of the women catches your eye, not aggressively, just a polite glance of invitation. This is your cue. You approach, cautiously. This time, you remember the gesture, a slow sweep of your hand toward a pile of little orange fruits that smell like honey and sweat. The vendor responds by picking one up and cradling it in both hands, as if offering a precious gem. This is the nonverbal offer, a way to say, "Would you like to buy?" You nod slightly. Another appropriate response. She lifts a second fruit and raises her eyebrows. 2 for 1. You lift your hand, palm open, questioning, not demanding. She smiles. This entire transaction is happening with no words. A full conversation in eyebrow flicks, wrist twitches, and polite tilts. It feels like a silent ballet. But then, you do it again. You point. Just a tiny, instinctive motion at the basket. Maybe you're trying to say, "Can I carry that one instead?" But all that comes out is a jab of your cursed index finger, and the moment shatters. The vendor flinches, just barely, but enough for you to realize you've broken the spell. You withdraw your hand like it's been burned and offer a clumsy apology. She's too gracious to chastise you, but you can feel her withdrawing into formal politeness. The warmth is gone. Lesson learned. In this market, your hands are as loud as your mouth. You retreat slightly, letting a child with a basket of tortillas cut in front of you. She doesn't point at anything, just moves with the confidence of someone raised in this symphony of etiquette. You notice now how everyone's hands are always low, soft, and calm. Buyers fold their hands while waiting. Sellers hold items with care, never shoving them at customers. Children are taught to keep their fingers together when gesturing. An open palm, always an open palm. Even beggars seated on mats hold their hands out cupped, never extended like a demand. It's a posture of humility, not expectation. Somewhere behind you, a voice raises briefly in laughter. You turn and see one of the silent market inspectors glide toward the sound. The laughter dies. The inspector passes, serene as a shadow. You make a mental note. No finger pointing, and definitely no loud guffaws near the prickly pears. Back at the center of the fruit quadrant, someone plays a small clay flute. The note is airy, drifting through the rows like mist. It calms you. You stand quietly, hands clasped, eyes half-lidded. Not quite blending in, but not crashing the ceremony either. You're learning. Slowly, awkwardly, but learning, and somewhere beneath the stress of gestural missteps and unspoken rules, you begin to feel it, the rhythm of the market. Not just the noise and motion, but the grace, the shared understanding, the ancient choreography of thousands of people moving through space without ever bumping elbows or breaking the spell. You won't point again, you promise. So far, you've bowed too fast, thanked people for no reason, and nearly offended 3 fruit vendors and 1 toddler. You're learning, but tonight, the lessons aren't done with you yet. You wander into a quieter stretch of the market, where the shouting dies down and the air smells less like hot maize and more like polished wood and crushed blossoms. The energy here is more hushed, serious. You're in the artisan quadrant now. Obsidian blades, clay incense burners, embroidered cloaks. These aren't impulse buys. This is where negotiations happen. You approach a stall lined with jade pendants. Your eye catches a polished one, shaped like a butterfly. It glows faintly green in the late sun. You decide, this is your moment. You've got the gestures down. You've learned how not to look directly at people. Surely, you're ready to haggle. You point. Wait. No? You almost point. But this time, you remember. You gesture instead with a smooth, practiced hand sweep. The vendor, an older woman with a gray-streaked braid and hands like polished bark, acknowledges you with a barely perceptible nod. You begin the ancient dance of the Aztec negotiation. Now, let's be clear. Haggling, the way you might think of it, boldly offering a lower price, wrangling, getting testy, is not how it's done here. This is not a flea market. This is a ritualized exchange where every motion, every sigh, every compliment is part of the choreography. You ask the price with a gentle phrase. The vendor tilts her head. Instead of naming a number, she responds with a poetic turn of phrase about how the jade was carved. with patience by the morning's first silence. Which might mean expensive, or might just mean, look at how polite I'm being. Hard to say. That here's a mainstream historical fact. The Aztecs didn't use coins. The economy relied on barter and commodity currency. Things like cacao beans, cotton cloths called quachli, or even axe-shaped copper bits. But prices weren't fixed. Trade, especially for non-essential goods, required negotiation. And those negotiations were often heavily ritualized. The more polite the tone, the more serious the intent. You reach into your small pouch. You don't have jade or cloths, but you've got cacao beans, a good number of them. You carefully lay a few in your open palm, not too many, not too few, and hold them forward. You speak softly, offer a compliment. This butterfly reminds me of dawn on Lake Texcoco. Not bad. The vendor doesn't respond right away. Instead, she sighs. It's a slow, deliberate sigh, almost a performance. She shakes her head gently and murmurs something about how rare the jade is, how long it took to polish, how it was shaped during a ceremony. She lifts the pendant, lets it catch the light. You add 2 more cacao beans. She tilts her head. There's no tension, no confrontation, just a mutual agreement to continue the dance. That here's your quirky tidbit. In some elite circles, a deal could take hours, not because the price was high, but because etiquette demanded a slow progression of offers and refusals, layered with metaphors, compliments, and soft sighs of faux reluctance. This wasn't bargaining. It was storytelling, and now you're part of it. She lays down the pendant slowly, says nothing. You interpret this, you hope correctly, as agreement. You slide the cacao beans over, 10 in total. A reasonable price for something this lovely. She picks them up with both hands. Always both hands. One-handed exchanges were considered lazy at best, disrespectful at worst. She says something that sounds like, "Your house will be shaded with cool wind." You nod gratefully, not entirely sure if that's a thank you, a curse, or a wish for mild weather. Either way, the deal is done. Historians still argue whether every vendor followed the poetic model or if some transactions, especially among lower-class buyers, were more blunt. But from the records of high-status marketplaces like Tlatelolco, it's clear that negotiation here was more ceremony than combat. You slip the pendant into your pouch and walk on, filled with a ridiculous sense of accomplishment. You've made a purchase without accidentally insulting anyone. You're practically a local, that is, until you try to buy a tamale. You spot the food vendor near the edge of the quadrant. The smell is impossible to ignore. Masa dough, roasted chilies, steam from banana leaf wrappings. The stall's owner is laughing gently with another customer. You wait your turn, respectful, then step forward, point to a tamale, and say something like delicious. The vendor blinks that you've done it again. Wrong quadrant, wrong tone, wrong transaction style. See, in the food section, negotiation isn't appropriate. Prepared food was considered a standard value commodity. No haggling, no sighing, no poetry. You point, you pay, you thank them, and you move on. But you've brought your jade pendant energy to the tamale zone, and now you're just awkwardly hovering. You scramble for the right move. Pull out a few cacao beans. Offer them with both hands. Murmur a quiet apology. The vendor nods, amused, and wraps the tamale for you anyway. That you're learning the layers of the marketplace, where you negotiate, where you obey, where you flatter, where you stay quiet. It's not just about what you buy. It's how you buy it. You settle onto a stone step near the vendor's stall and unwrap the tamale slowly. It's still steaming. You bite into it, careful not to moan too loudly in appreciation. Remember, loud eating noises might draw the attention of the silent inspectors. The marketplace continues around you. A child nearby is miming the motions of trade with pebbles and twigs. A woman arranges cloths with reverent care. Somewhere in the distance, a flute plays a sleepy note. You chew slowly, because here, even eating feels like part of the etiquette. You finish the tamale, carefully, quietly, reverently, and brush the crumbs from your tunic like someone who's finally beginning to understand their place in a strange, ancient ballet. At least, you thought you understood until now, because the moment you stand up, you look around, and you're lost, not metaphorically. You are actually lost in the vast, sacred geometry of the marketplace, a living labyrinth designed by obsessive planners and probably one or two celestial bureaucrats. It's like a city inside a city, and you, brave explorer, have taken a wrong turn somewhere between fermented fish paste and ceremonial flowers. You were supposed to go left at the tamale vendor. You went right. Now you're staring at a stall that appears to be selling powdered lizard skin, neatly labeled in tiny gourd bowls. So, this is definitely not the produce section. You try to backtrack, only to realize you've walked into what might be the sacred commodity zone, the beating heart of the Tlatelolco Marketplace. This is where the high-value items live: obsidian, feathers, incense, cacao, salt, and tiny jade animals carved so delicately you're afraid to look at them too long. That it's beautiful. It's quiet, and it's intimidating in a way that makes you instinctively lower your head, shuffle your steps, and whisper sorry, even though no one said anything to you yet. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Tlatelolco market wasn't thrown together at random. It was zoned and planned, with items grouped by category and value. Scholars believe there were fixed areas for every kind of trade, from pottery to precious stones, with central corridors left clear for foot traffic and ceremonial access. It's likely the entire structure mirrored cosmological beliefs, so getting lost isn't just confusing, it might actually be spiritually rude. You try to walk in what feels like a respectful direction and almost collide with a priest carrying a bundle of dried frogs tied together with red twine. He raises an eyebrow. You mumble another apology. He mutters something about young ones today and disappears behind a curtain of white cotton cloth. You stop. You take a breath. You look around. Here's where it gets really odd. Every single stall here is shaped like a small stepped pyramid. Not literally, but the displays are tiered, stacked in symmetrical formations that seem deliberate. Fruit bowls rise in threes. Textiles are folded into layers. Incense burners sit in concentric circles around bundles of sage. Even the feathers are arranged like rays around a tiny clay sun. This isn't just good merchandising. It's cosmological architecture in miniature. Every vendor, consciously or not, is mimicking the structure of the world. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some archaeologists believe the layout of Tlatelolco mirrored the four cardinal directions, with stalls oriented to reflect not just function, but ritual geography. As in, this is where you sell salt, because salt is sacred to the west wind. No pressure. You realize now that your simple stroll has brought you to a place where even your footsteps might be out of line. You turn slowly, trying to find a way out of this sacred quadrant without knocking over anything divine, and immediately spot a young merchant stacking bricks of dried dye. You wander toward her, hoping for guidance. You ask, softly, if she knows where the produce stalls are. She looks at you, then down at your feet, then back at you. You're standing in the merchant passage, she says gently. You shouldn't be here. You glance down. There's nothing obviously wrong. No glowing floor tiles or carved signs. But now that she mentions it, the space you're occupying is unusually clean, unworn, quiet. You've stumbled into one of the sacred merchant paths, walkways kept clear for processions, for porters carrying ceremonial goods, or for high-ranking traders whose footsteps are considered part of the marketplace's rhythm. Historians still argue whether these passageways were enforced by formal rules or maintained through sheer cultural memory. Some suggest painted markers once existed on the stone floor, now worn away. Others believe that everyone just knew, like the unspoken rules of walking on the left side of a staircase. Either way, you're not supposed to be standing here. You shuffle off, embarrassed. Eventually, with a few more wrong turns and one awkward detour past a stall that may or may not be selling ritual toenail clippings, you find your way back to the central area. You breathe out a shaky sigh. There's an open square here, where people gather, rest, or listen to quiet music played on turtle-shell drums. It's the social heart of the market, a place where even the etiquette feels a little looser. People murmur greetings. A child offers you a dried fig. A man with a falcon on his wrist nods as you pass. You pause, grateful for the moment of stillness. You sit beside a woman weaving tiny flowers into a garland. She doesn't speak, but she doesn't move away either. You found a neutral space. No trade, no hierarchy, just the quiet hum of the city at rest. And then you hear the unmistakable call of someone hawking fermented axolotl paste. Yes, that's a thing. The smell is distinctive. The vendor has stacked clay pots of the paste into a perfect ziggurat. You watch as he sells 2 jars using the proper hand gestures, the correct bows, and a phrase that sounds suspiciously like a blessing and a recipe combined. You smile, quietly. You're still very lost. But at least you're not completely hopeless anymore. You brush aside a curtain of woven agave fibers, stepping into a less crowded but no less confusing part of the market, where etiquette is no longer just about haggling or body posture, but about what not to touch. The so-called do not touch zones. Here, among the stalls of textiles, intricate ceramics, and personal care items, you learn a harsh truth. In the Aztec Marketplace, your fingers can get you into more trouble than your words. That soft-looking cotton blanket, dyed in what looks like lavender and teal, you reach for it, and suddenly the vendor's eyes narrow. No words, just a stillness, like you just knocked over a sacred vase in a monastery. You quickly retract your hand, and they go back to counting cacao beans like nothing happened. Crisis narrowly averted. The reality is, while some stalls invite touching, like food stalls or tool shops where texture and weight matter, others don't. And unless you grew up here, you'd have no way of knowing which was which. There were no helpful signs saying, "Please do not touch the embroidered jaguar cloak." The Aztecs assumed you'd already know. And that's where you, the outsider, would fumble. You trail past a stall filled with obsidian mirrors and smooth jewelry stones, each glinting in the sun. The vendor smiles at you, but not with you. You catch the subtle placing of a ceremonial feather fan between your hand and the nearest stone. A gentle reminder, admiration from afar is the polite thing to do. Historians still debate how rigid these unspoken rules truly were. Some argue they were specific to elite markets like Tlatelolco, where the upper class demanded more ceremony. Others believe even rural markets followed the look, don't touch unless invited code, if there's a practical reason behind this fastidiousness. Obsidian blades and ceramic vessels are fragile and costly to remake. If you break it, the vendor's not chasing you with a receipt. You're expected to pay, even if it was an innocent fumble. Word to the wise, if your hand breaks it, your beans buy it. But it's not all anxiety and accidental offense. You soon notice that vendors do allow interaction, once you've shown the proper respect. You observe a local woman nod politely, raise 2 fingers near a textile, and wait. The vendor mirrors the gesture, then motions her forward. Only then does she touch the weave. That's the game. Subtle gestures, pauses, and permissions that are fringe detail tucked in the corner of scholarly writings. Some vendors placed symbolic objects, like a bird feather or tiny stone, to silently signal hands off. Green feathers reportedly meant admire only, while red ones meant ask first. It's like an ancient version of color-coded shopping bags. Handy, if you weren't too sleepy to remember which color meant what. You walk farther into the aisle and notice a carved wooden comb lying on a piece of cloth. It's glistening with beeswax and must have taken someone hours to make. You almost bend down to test its weight when you catch sight of the feather tied to its display stick, orange. Oh great, was orange a no-touch or a maybe touch of fewer charming sort of feather? You back away cautiously, deciding to err on the side of not starting an etiquette war over a grooming tool. It's a constant ballet of awareness, this marketplace. And now you see why it was less about goods and more about navigating a collective rhythm. When to engage, when to admire, and when to walk away. Even the children around you seem to know. A toddler toddles up to a gourd filled with dried beans, eyes wide. But before he touches it, he turns to his mother, who gently nods and gestures a flat hand down. He stops. A toddler, who already knows better than you do. You wonder how much of this comes naturally, how much is taught, and how much is absorbed by osmosis, like the quiet etiquette of subway riders or elevator small talk. You can't point to where the rules live. They just hover in the air, enforced not by law but by eyes and silence. There's even a suggestion among some scholars that these customs were part of a broader spiritual discipline. In Aztec worldview, moderation and restraint had moral weight. To touch what was not yours without permission wasn't just rude, it was disorderly. It invited imbalance. You weren't just a bad shopper. You were shaking the moral scaffolding of the cosmos. That might be a little dramatic, but it definitely adds pressure the next time you lean toward a painted jug. Eventually, you adjust. You stand a little further back. You wait a beat longer before asking to see something. And you find that, surprisingly, this makes you feel calmer. No rush, no impulse grabbing, just slow appreciation. You begin to enjoy it. The unspoken communication, the gentle tempo. It's like trading in caffeine for herbal tea. Everything is quieter, but don't get too comfortable. Because right around the next bend, where the stalls of smoked fish meet the scent of toasted amaranth, you're about to stumble into an entirely different minefield, gift-giving. And no, it's not as simple as, here, I brought you something. You've made it past the sound of haggling over obsidian tools and chili peppers, and now your sandaled feet shuffle into the territory of high fashion, or at least, what counted for it in the Aztec Marketplace. Welcome to the part of the market where cotton, feathers, shells, and vanity all collide into something gloriously impractical. Cotton garments, you discover, are a sign of wealth. While most of the common folk wear maguey fiber, rough, coarse, and very breathable in a way that screams peasant, those strolling around in fine, dyed cotton tunics might as well be flashing credit cards made of gold. You pass a stand displaying cloak after cloak, each folded neatly, arranged from most affordable to don't touch unless you're a noble. Some are embroidered with brightly colored threads, others are fringed with rabbit fur, and a few daring designs are stitched with tiny bells, probably not ideal for sneaking up on anyone. You watch a trader fluffing out a mantle made of quetzal feathers, which glisten in the sunlight like a bird had burst into rainbows. It looks impractical, impossible to clean, and entirely mesmerizing. You wonder who buys such a thing and where they wear it. Perhaps to one of those elite ball games where the outcome sometimes ends with a beheading, or maybe just a brunch. The textile sellers take themselves very seriously. It's not just about having fabric, it's about how you display it. Cloths are measured not by length or width, but by a unit called a paddle, which is essentially a folded bundle. How many paddle of cotton you can afford determines your status. Imagine walking into a store and having your salary evaluated in rolled-up towels. Historians still argue whether these textile bundles were used strictly as trade goods or if they doubled as currency. What's clearer is that Aztecs paid tribute in these very items. Villages often owed their rulers specific counts of cotton cloth per month. Forget about taxes being withdrawn from your paycheck. These people had to keep looms running just to stay out of trouble. A friendly vendor gestures toward you, holding out a piece of navy blue cloth dyed with indigo and crushed snails. Yes, that's right, snails. The murex snail, to be precise, prized for its rare pigment that stains your fingers for days and your ego for even longer. You politely decline. Snail juice doesn't exactly pair with your skin tone. Near the cloth section, you encounter a quieter, more reverent space, the feather market. This isn't your average arts and crafts store. These feathers were treated with near religious reverence. The most prized among them were the long green tail feathers of the quetzal bird, sourced from the jungles to the south. Catching a quetzal without harming it was a skill on par with brain surgery. One wrong move, and the bird would die of stress. No pressure. The feathers are arranged in carefully tied bundles, sorted by species, hue, and extravagance. One trader boasts he has hummingbird feathers by the hundred, perfect for adding glitter to headdresses or war shields. You nod, pretending you haven't just imagined an entire army charging into battle in sparkling bee-sized sparkles. Then, there's the jewelry. You drift toward a cluster of stalls overflowing with jade beads, obsidian pendants, and seashell necklaces. Some are clearly meant for trade. Others seem more like status symbols meant to intimidate or impress. One merchant shows off a nose ring so large it would surely interfere with both eating and basic breathing. Jewelry in Aztec society wasn't just adornment. It shouted your place in the social pecking order. The more jade you wore, the more people were expected to shut up when you entered a room. If you were truly noble, you didn't even have to walk. You were carried, like a sparkly piñata of prestige. Of course, there were rules about what you could wear. Peasants weren't allowed to dress like nobles. If someone lowborn strutted around in noble garb, they could be punished harshly. So no, you couldn't fake it till you make it. You had to stay in your sartorial lane. You find yourself admiring a delicate headband made from twisted cotton and lined with turquoise beads. It's oddly modern looking, like something that would do well on Etsy or in a yoga studio. You're tempted to barter for it, but you remember, you're here to observe, not shop. Nearby, a curious scene unfolds. A merchant catches a young boy trying to swipe a feather. But instead of screaming or chasing him, the vendor calmly explains the value of the feather, where it came from, what bird, how it had to be preserved, and gently takes it back. The boy listens, wide-eyed, then nods solemnly and leaves empty-handed. It's a strange blend of discipline and pride, and you can't help but wonder if the boy will come back one day, not to steal, but to trade. You pass a stall where the merchant is burning copal incense, sending curls of fragrant smoke over his wares. Some believe this helps attract good luck, or possibly just masks the smell of sweaty shoppers. Either way, it adds to the air of mystique as the sun begins to drop lower in the sky. The golden light sets the cotton and feathers ablaze with color. The market seems to slow slightly, and traders stretch their backs, preparing for the evening rush. You take one last look at the artistry on display, every fold, every stitch, every plume, and you realize this isn't just shopping. It's storytelling, status signaling, and surviving, all wrapped up in cloth and feather, and honestly, you're still not over the snail dye. You follow the drifting aroma of roasting maize and sweet cacao to a quieter corner of the market, where the hustle of hawkers gives way to an atmosphere that feels almost sacred. You're in the heart of a calm zone, unofficial but rigidly respected. Here, vendors speak in hushed tones, and customers mirror their restraint. Even the rustle of garments seems subdued. It's not that people are quieter because they're shy. It's etiquette. You've stepped into the domain of high-value goods, and apparently, your voice isn't invited to yell about them. You pause at a stall selling obsidian blades so sharp they make modern scalpel manufacturers wince. The vendor, A middle-aged woman with a face weathered by sun and years of silent judgment looks up at you without smiling. She doesn't offer a price. She waits, because in this part of the market, you're not supposed to ask about money first. That's for amateurs. Instead, you're supposed to admire the craftsmanship. Ask about the source of the stone, maybe mention how it catches the light. Then, only then, can you whisper a suggested trade that's right. You whisper. You don't bargain in broad daylight with the volume of a street performer. You lean in, hands visible, and float a quiet offer like you're sharing a secret. 2 fine tunics, you murmur. The vendor considers. She doesn't say yes. She also doesn't say no. Instead, she begins rearranging the blades, her eyes flicking to the side. That's Aztec for maybe, but I'm waiting for a better pitch. You're in a zone where etiquette is nuanced, dictated by mutual respect and a carefully maintained illusion of leisure. Historians still argue whether these etiquette rules evolved organically or were enforced by local market overseers. Some suggest temple priests exerted influence over behavior in these more ceremonial corners, especially when the wares bordered on spiritual tools. Others think it was just pure pressure. Nobody wants to be the one yelling over a pile of polished bone needles. Nearby, a merchant selling turquoise trinkets motions for you to come closer. You inch forward and admire a necklace that sparkles in the low afternoon sun. It's woven with careful knots, each bead a puzzle of blue and green. The vendor subtly points to your sandals. Apparently, the necklace is worth your shoes. You chuckle softly and tap your chin, pretending to consider it. Then, in the universal language of stalling, you look up at the sky. This sort of silent negotiation is an art form. And like all arts, it comes with its own lexicon, none of which is spoken aloud. A hand on the hip? Impatience. A furrowed brow? Disappointment in your offer. A tilted head? Interest. Vendors in this part of the marketplace are fluent in an entire dialect of body language, eyebrow lifts, and faint sighs. You're still on page 1 of the phrasebook. A boy walks past with a clay bowl of steaming atoll, and the vendor glances after him wistfully. You seize your moment. 2 tunics and the rest of this cacao. You whisper, holding up your modest pouch. Her eyes flit back to the necklace. She nods once, quick and precise, then scoops it into a palm-woven pouch and hands it to you. Deal that you're proud of yourself until you notice a much finer necklace hanging just behind where you were looking. The vendor gives you a look that says, "Rookie mistake," and resumes rearranging her display. Another etiquette rule you learn quickly. In these calm zones, it's bad form to haggle on behalf of someone else. If your friend wants that jade ears pull, they need to do the dance themselves. No wingmen. Otherwise, it's considered disrespectful, like sending a child to do your worship for you. And under no circumstances are you to touch the merchandise unless invited. This isn't a museum, but it's close. The only thing worse than reaching out uninvited is sniffing something. Yes, someone did that once with a bundle of incense, and the vendor closed up shop for the rest of the day in silent protest. Interestingly, some anthropologists suggest these silent negotiation zones were used to balance the chaos of the wider market. By creating pockets of calm, they may have helped reduce market fatigue and prevent social tensions. Like little oases of structure in a desert of shouting. And yet, these zones weren't just for etiquette. They were also social theaters. Everyone was watching everyone else. Status was displayed through your mannerisms more than your clothes. Did you bow slightly? Did you speak only after being addressed? Did you offer too much too soon? Slip up, and you'd not only lose face. You might lose your place as a regular. One vendor tells you, very softly, that she once saw a high-ranking priestess offer 3 painted gourds and a single word for a carving made of pure gold. She got it. No fuss. The crowd parted like water. Apparently, Grace outranked gold in these spaces that as you leave the calm zone, the sensory shift is jarring. Shouts again, barking dogs, drums. A parrot screeches from someone's shoulder. You blink, adjusting. It feels like re-entering the real world after a meditative trance that a boy runs past, chasing a hoop with a stick. He bumps into you and yells a quick apology, unthinkable in the calm zone. You check your pouch. The necklace is still there. Somehow, it feels heavier now that you're realizing that etiquette in the Aztec Marketplace wasn't just about politeness. It was layered performance, psychological warfare, and a little bit of magic. You might not survive round 2. They don't wear uniforms. They don't announce their presence. They simply appear, much like owls, perched quietly at the edges of vendor stalls, arms crossed, eyes half-lidded. These were the Aztec market inspectors, often priests or appointed elders, responsible for enforcing order and ritual decorum. And while they rarely intervened physically, their stern silence spoke volumes. Speak too loudly near the cacao counters? Fine. Attempt to sneak a chili without bowing to the vendor? Double fine. Most of their enforcement came from shaming, publicly pointing out the offender with an elegant, nonverbal hand gesture, then writing their name in a bark paper ledger with excruciatingly slow strokes. Even the tone of your voice could earn a warning. Too sharp, too abrupt, too joyful, any of these might disturb the sacred tranquility expected in the marketplace. When you're in Tlatelolco and sense that someone is watching you from the shadows of the squash pile. Just assume it's an inspector and do your best to look both humble and forgettable. You finally managed to buy a small bundle of white corn. You paid fairly. You bowed. You didn't make eye contact with a chicken that you're free, right? Not yet in the Aztec world. Maize was sacred, a divine gift from the gods, and a spiritual cornerstone of daily life. So any exchange of corn required an additional ritual, a market tax, paid not in coin, but in symbolism. You shuffle toward a modest little shrine at the marketplace's edge. There sits an elder, eyes closed, surrounded by marigold petals and small bowls of ground copal resin that you're expected to place a single kernel on the stone platform. Murmur a phrase of gratitude to the maize mother, and if you're lucky, hum a short melody passed down by your vendor, something about sunlight, rain, and keeping the worms out. Only then are you truly permitted to eat the corn or carry it home. Somehow, this tax is less annoying than modern sales tax, and it smells a lot better in your world. Small talk is a filler, something awkward you mumble while waiting for coffee. But in the Aztec marketplace, it was an art form, nearly as important as the goods themselves. Before any transaction, especially with skilled artisans or healers, you were expected to engage in a ritual exchange of words. These weren't idle. They were warm, deliberate, and deeply traditional that a vendor might ask, "How did the night rest upon your house?" Or, "Did the hummingbirds bless your dreams?" And you, half asleep, would need to answer with equal poetry. "The moon carried my thoughts kindly. My bones are still where I left them. Thank you." Only after this verbal pas de deux could the vendor discuss prices, or even let you look at the goods directly. Those who skipped this custom were seen as rude or even spiritually hollow, as if they had no soul worth trading with. If you're shopping for obsidian mirrors or dried ants, start with a compliment about the sunrise. It'll go further than money. By this point, you're full of maize, mentally foggy from a dozen sacred corn taxes, and deeply ready to drift away, literally and figuratively. So, without much thought, you quietly turn to leave the Tlatelolco market. You're halfway through a discreet exit shuffle when you notice something odd. The crowd has rearranged itself, not in a dramatic way, just subtly, like sand reshaping under a tide. But now there's no straight path out. You step left, 3 traders are suddenly examining feathers. You step right, Two elderly women are embroiled in a discussion about the ripeness of avocados in a tone that sounds suspiciously like a warning. You turn back. Your favorite tamale vendor is now politely ignoring you with such intensity that it almost feels coordinated. This, it turns out, is the polite human funnel. The market has its own exit ritual, one designed to prevent abrupt departures that might disrupt the energy of the plaza. Leaving without giving thanks to the sun god, bowing to the cardinal directions, or at the very least saying goodbye to 3 vendors and a passing dog, is gently frowned upon. So you surrender. You let the tide of bodies guide you, one slow shuffle at a time, toward a clearly designated ceremonial exit lane. It takes 20 minutes. There is flute music involved. Finally, at the threshold of the market, an old man in a brilliant red cloak nods to you. He doesn't speak. You don't speak. But somehow, you understand. You may go now, and you do. Slowly, respectfully. Full of beans and rules you'll never remember. Quietly grateful for the most exhausting, nap-inducing shopping experience of your life, that you're meandering past the animal section, hypnotized by the sight of dozens of turkeys, each fluffed like ceremonial pillows, their feathers shimmering with greens and coppers. You reach out, just casually, mind you, to touch one. Maybe just a soft poke, a feathery boop. But before your hand even gets close, the bird cocks its head with disdain, and the elderly turkey seller snaps her fingers once, that's all. One snap, suddenly, 2 children appear. They don't speak. They just stare at you with the expression of small, polite executioners. Apparently, touching a turkey is equivalent to bargaining without intention to buy. A big no-no. The turkeys are sacred. They're used in religious offerings, noble banquets, and festive impersonations of gods. So, you smile, nod, apologize to the turkey, and walk away, hoping no one saw your near faux pas. The turkey continues looking at you like it remembers everything. It probably does. Further down the path, you pass a vendor selling what looks suspiciously like a pile of rocks. But she is proudly explaining how each one is not just a rock, but a rare obsidian variant infused with volcanic wisdom. You chuckle, softly, even respectfully. Just a little laugh, and that's when you realize everyone around you is silent. No one is laughing. Even a baby nearby is holding its breath that you've broken the unspoken rule of market sincerity. Here, vendors believe that their wares, no matter how odd, lumpy, or vaguely magical, deserve your full attention and gravity. So now you're forced into a 15-minute apology ritual involving small nods, gifting a chili pepper, and complimenting the rock's shape with a level of seriousness normally reserved for royal funerals. Lesson learned. If you don't understand it, admire it anyway, even if it's clearly just a rock with a cool backstory. As you meander through the stalls, dodging baskets of chilies and artfully stacked pyramids of squash, you notice something peculiar. The marketplace, despite the thousands of people, is quiet. Not silent, but hushed. A murmur, like a distant stream or an indecisive breeze, lingers in the No shouting. No loud bargaining. No vendors proclaiming 3 tomatoes for 1 cocoa bean. Final offer. Instead, all the deals are made in what can only be described as conspiratorial politeness. This isn't due to shyness. It's a matter of deep cultural etiquette. The Aztecs believed that volume revealed emotional imbalance. A loud voice meant agitation, and in the market, a sacred, communal, almost spiritual space. Calm was essential. So, when you want to buy something, you must lean in. Not too close, just enough for the vendor to hear your price. You say it with a whisper. The vendor replies with a slower, even quieter tone. Sometimes, they raise an eyebrow instead of a number, and haggling? It happens, but it's a slow dance. You don't go back and forth like 2 roosters in a squabble. You wait. You reflect. You reconsider. Then maybe, just maybe, you offer one more bean. Or don't. Raising your voice during negotiations is considered spiritually disruptive, like throwing a rock into a pond where the gods nap. No one wants to wake the pond gods. So, in the Aztec market, you learn to speak softly and carry a very quiet shopping list that you're reaching out for a piece of beautifully woven cloth, something soft, indigo dyed, maybe meant for wrapping tamales or gifting to someone you like. When a sharp tap lands gently on your wrist, a market guardian stands beside you. His expression isn't angry. It's just deeply disappointed. You freeze, hand hovering over the cloth like a child caught touching an artifact in a museum. Because here's the thing. In the Aztec market, touching is serious business. If your hand crosses into the vendor's space without clear intention and without the expected preliminary gestures, it may be perceived as stealing, or at the very least, poor-formed. In a world where formal behavior matters more than volume, accidental rudeness is still rudeness. And stealing, even a misunderstanding, that's a punishable offense. The laws in Tenochtitlan are not vague suggestions. They're more like divine contracts, written into cosmic etiquette. Some accounts claim that punishments could be harsh, like public shaming or working in the market's cleaning crews for a week without rest. But historians still argue whether the most extreme versions, like amputation or death, were reserved only for repeat, deliberate offenders. Either way, it's not worth it for one strip of fabric. So now, you learn a new rule: always gesture first. Let your eyes do the asking, then your hand, then your words, never the reverse. In this place, intent precedes action, and even your casual reach is a declaration. Best not to declare anything you don't truly mean that you're ready to haggle. You've practiced your offers. You know the price of a small bundle of amaranth grain in at least 2 districts. You've adjusted your cloak just so, hoping to project the aura of a serious buyer. And then, you overplay your hand. The vendor smiles at you with a warmth that feels both kind and subtly mocking. He gently declines your offer, not with words, but with a slow shake of the head and a glance downward, as if disappointed not in your price, but in your spirit that you've made the rookie mistake, showing pride that in the Aztec Marketplace. Commerce is cooperation, not conquest. A good trade honors both parties. It's not a battle of wills, but a slow negotiation rooted in balance and respect. If you act like a warrior in the marketplace, the transaction dies before it's born. Sellers are more inclined to work with the humble, the thoughtful, those who ask instead of demand. Haggling isn't about tricking someone into a lower price. It's more like whispering to a friend, "Is this really the best we can do together?" The proud go home empty-handed. Or worse, they get offered the worst avocados. You notice a curious thing while observing a deal over several gourds of honey water. The buyer and seller seem to be putting on a show. There are head tilts, polite gasps, hands extended and withdrawn like dancers in a slow ritual. It's not just business, it's art. The Aztecs approached the market like a theater of daily life. Every interaction, especially in high-traffic stalls, was part commerce, part ceremony, and part community theater. This wasn't just about getting what you needed. It was about being seen trading well. People watched. People learned. People judged, gently, of course, but thoroughly. Were you respectful? Were you fair? Did you show generosity when appropriate? Did you thank the seller with the appropriate phrases, like "ma quali niha," roughly, "it is good for me"? The goal was harmony, yes, but also to be remembered as a person of dignity. Money in the Aztec world didn't come in coins or crisp notes. Instead, it jingled in sacks of cacao beans, stacked in bundles of cotton cloths, or even in practical tools like obsidian blades or small copper bells. Cacao beans were the everyday currency. A handful could buy you a meal, a cloak, or a short song from a board street musician. Cotton cloaks, called quachli, were a higher value standard, useful for big purchases, legal fines, and even taxes. Some things weren't for sale with cacao alone. Try buying a rare feather cape or a carved jade earring. You'd need cotton, tools, maybe even a promise of service or delivery. Each vendor had their preferences. One might scoff at cacao, but leap at the sight of a well-made obsidian scraper. So, you learn to carry options. Your pouch rattles with beans. Your arms carry folded cloths. Your belt holds a tool or two. In this market, the currency is as flexible as the people. It's not just what you offer, it's how you offer it. Somewhere near the central square, behind a shade-covered stall, sits a quiet figure with an armful of paper. Not paper, exactly. A mattle, bark paper, smooth and prepared by hand. This is a market scribe. His job is not to write poems or prayers. His job is to observe prices, disputes, special transactions, maybe even note who tried to pass off fake cacao. These scribes were essential. The Aztec Empire ran on meticulous records. How much maize passed through which city? Which trader brought turquoise from the north? Who paid their tribute? And who didn't? They wrote with black ink and red ink, each color used for different meanings. Red for divine or powerful names. Black for the everyday, the tradable, the recorded so while you haggle for smoked turkey or try to argue a cloak's quality, know this: someone, somewhere, is probably recording you, not for punishment, for posterity. At the far edge of the market, near a shaded corner where flower vendors gather, stands a small shrine. It's simple, a stone plinth, a bowl for offerings, and carvings of a figure with round eyes and a cheek full of stars. Etiquette, the god of merchants. The god is always watching. And not just Etiquette, other deities too. Some stalls whisper prayers to Tlaloc, hoping for good rains to keep the produce fresh. Others nod towards Totec, the flayed god of agriculture and renewal. In the Aztec view, commerce and divinity are intertwined. The market isn't just economic, it's spiritual. Trade is a way of honoring the cycles of the universe, a chance to show that you, too, can participate in cosmic balance. So don't cheat. Don't lie. Don't insult a vendor's mother. Even if they don't see it, the gods surely do. You wander for hours. You admire gourds. You sniff incense. You stroke a feathered headdress and make eye contact with a vendor who nods too eagerly. But in the end, you buy nothing. It's awkward. You feel guilty, but you've learned. Even leaving the market has rules that if you don't buy anything, you must still acknowledge the vendors you interacted with. A simple bow, a soft word, even a half smile followed by a touch to the heart is acceptable. Why? Because attention is value. Looking is participation. And every time you engage, even without a sale, you affirm the community. So you don't slink away. You stroll out slowly, respectfully. You pass the shrine again, toss in a bean or two. You nod at the guardian, now dozing in the shade. And you leave knowing that sometimes, simply being present is enough. Later that night, you lie beneath your woven mat, staring up at the ceiling. You think about the market, the smells, the sounds, the endless colors. You try to remember all the rules about touching, about haggling, about walking in circles instead of cutting across the square. But the truth is, you're already forgetting, and that's perfectly normal because the Aztec Marketplace wasn't designed to be memorized. It was designed to be experienced again and again. You return not to follow the rules, but to relearn them, to practice humility, to be part of something larger than yourself. Tomorrow, the same market will greet you, the same vendors, new goods, new weather, new you, and maybe this time, you'll get the cloak. Or maybe you'll just smile at a stranger, buy some beans, and forget the price before you're even home. Because that 2 is the art of trading in the world of the Aztecs, to live in the moment, quietly, respectfully, and together.